And welcome back to Dollars and Dragons. Today I have with me Rick Perry. If you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience, Rick.
Howdy, I'm Rick Perry, and I work mainly on Dimension 20 as a production designer and creative producer.
And I did want to get into, like, since you have a different profession than a lot of the people that you might find on like a podcast like this, I really wanted to talk about your profession and how you ended up there. So let's start with art school. Like, what made you decide that you were going to get into art school, and like, where were your first passions?
Yeah, well, I guess I've always been kind of a visually oriented person. Growing up, I made a lot of art, and my mom was a grade school art teacher, so that was a thing that was like a value that we had and stuff. And so then when it was time to go to college, visual arts seemed like the thing for me, and so I went to. I'm from Texas. Grew up in like rural Texas outside of Austin, and I went to a state university called University of North Texas, and I studied drawing and painting there. I really didn't know what I was going to do with that degree. It was kind of like, as I was told by many people, like kind of a dead end path, or just there was no career prospects. And it's actually something I've thought about a lot, as an adult now, is or a creative professional, is that, when I was a kid, there really wasn't anyone around me or my kind of family or whatever that was a creative professional whose job was to play music or to be an artist or create things or whatever. And so it kind of didn't feel like a real legitimate field when I studied it, but I did.
Yeah, I remember growing up personally, being into like reading and writing and a little bit of drawing and like performance and stuff. And I suppose now that you mention, I guess it's a good thing that my mom also was like a drama kid growing up, because there was a kind of positive reinforcement. I don't know if I would have pursued it after like my initial first interest as a teenager, because I started writing, I think when I was like 12 or 13, like seriously, and I turned in this 80,000 word
Whoa.
draft to my like eighth grade English teacher. And, after that, and like because of my parents like being supportive, at least, like I could, even when I got grounded, they wouldn't ground me from the computer. They would just like ground me from the internet. So I could still, write and stuff like that. I remember my brother complaining about it one time, and I remember my mom saying like, if you want to be creative and you want to paint or you want to draw or you want to write, like we're not going to take that away from you. So I remember that as a kid. So that's really cool. And you attended school where?
University of North Texas in Denton,
Okay.
Texas.
How
Yeah.
Denton, Texas. Is that near Wichita Falls at all?
Not
No.
exactly. It's north of Dallas and Fort Worth. It's kind of
Okay, okay.
about 30 miles or 30 minutes north of Dallas Fort Worth, and it's kind of up not quite to Oklahoma. It's sort of in its own area up there. It's a great town. It's a very this amazing music there. The jazz school there is like a world class, like maybe the best school in the world for jazz, and it's just a very kind of arty kind of like progressive, cool like college town. So it was a good place to go and sort of grow and study and stuff.
Yeah, did you attend any of those shows when you were there at college, and like you went to jazz shows and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the dorm that I lived in for, I think it was the first year and a half or 2 years. They it was the one right across from the music building, so it was like mostly art kids and music kids, and just constant people practicing and people checking out. There was just jazz playing all the time, all over the place. So you got it, whether it was just by osmosis, So I definitely grew an appreciation for jazz, and also just it's just impressive being around people who are like so incredibly skilled at that kind of thing, just like watching people play and seeing their dedication, and very inspiring. And just it was for me, who was not super musical, it was kind of a very inspiring backdrop.
How did you end up going from there? Did you move to California next?
So I finished school there, and I kind of hung around a little bit, and then I went and lived in Mexico for a little bit, and went to Europe, backpacking for a couple months. I had some friends who had moved to New York City, and so I kind of saved up some money and moved to New York, and lived in like Brooklyn and Manhattan for a couple years, and that's where I got into film production.
You went backpacking like right after school to Mexico and then Europe.
Yeah.
So was that like a direct path, or like was that in the plan, or did you just end up going that way?
The Europe thing was like, very like like a lot of people do that, especially then, and so I was like, oh, that sounds awesome, I want to go do that, and so I did, and I think my grandma gave me her air miles or something for a graduation gift and everything, and then I was back in Denton, and then some buddies had been going down to Mexico to like just go be down there and study Spanish and sort of just have an adventure, I guess, or whatever. And so that sounded pretty good. I went and did that for a couple months.
Yeah, what a young 20-year-old thing to do. Just just
Totally.
just go somewhere, and what a different time it was back then. Wow.
Yeah.
How did you end up getting involved in movie and television sets?
So I was living in New York, and I was working at a Comp USA, which I don't think they're around anymore, but it's like a computer kind of big box store, kind of like a Best Buy, but more for computers. And was working at this big store on Broadway in Manhattan, and selling Macs. I kind of always been sort of a computer person, as well, and it was horrible. I just not a salesperson is not my cup of tea, and it was miserable. And I had heard that there was this thing that you could do called being a production assistant in film and television. I didn't know anything about it. It wasn't the field that I had studied at all, and it just sounded really neat. And so I saved up some money and just quit my job, and then I just reached out to every person I could find online on like Craigslist and all these different things. And I worked for free, for a month or so on like student films and kind of anything that any chance I could take. And then I started getting calls to come and work for paid gigs. And then after, like, by the time 3 months were up, I was like having to turn down jobs, and I just felt like, oh wow, I have a job now, and it was kind of a revelation for me because, like I said, I kind of didn't really think I had any sort of prospects in a creative, like an actual creative job. It just seems so distant and not a real thing. And working in film was actually it was a lot like these experiences I had in college, where I would work on these kind of collaborative performance art projects with friends, where it was like this highly collaborative, kind of clandestine, like, really intense thing where you're working 12 hours a day, and you're doing this sort of like kind of esoteric work that like is hard to even describe to people what happens on a film set unless they work on film sets. And it's very fleeting. It has this ephemeral quality where you all work really hard, and then they get the shot, and then you just take it all apart, and it goes away, and it doesn't exist anymore except in that film version. So like all those things, that kind of romantic thing of it, and you get paid for it, and it's like, wow, this, I for the first time in my life was like, this is a field that I could see myself working in, forever, and I could make money, and I can, live a life and have a family and all this sort of stuff. It was like pretty I was hooked.
Yeah, there's something, the way that you describe that about movie sets being ephemeral and you putting all this work into this one moment. I feel like that is sort of the social glue, or like the lubricant for like creating like really lasting bonds with people, because you share this very intimate thing that occurred that only you and this small group of people have. Have you made like a lot of like really long standing friends in your life that way, or?
Yeah, I have. It's a funny thing, because each time you come onto a project, whether it's a movie or, that's going to be like a 4 or 5 month project, or if it's maybe just a commercial and it's like a week and a half or something, you know, a new group of people assembles usually. Like, even if it's a crew that's worked together before, there's some people that weren't available or other people that have joined, and so it's this new kind of like family or little group that forms, and you have this really intense experience, and then you disband, and so I think there are people that I have worked with on my very first jobs that are still very good friends, and I think you're right, there is a kind of like, we shared that experience together kind of thing that doesn't go away. And even people who have gone on to do, big things, and we don't even work in the same kind of arenas anymore. Thinking of a friend who's like an Emmy award-winning production designer who has his own company and all these people working for him, but like we're still pals, and we have this kind of bond that is from 20 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like the at least from what I understand, like as an outsider's perspective, everyone that I've talked to for those sort of award shows, it's like always kind of like, well, you're just like rolling the dice or you're flipping the coin, and a lot of the time it doesn't feel like you either have earned something like that and it doesn't necessarily change much about you as a person because like it's always like something that you did like a year or 2 years ago and you're so divorced from like all of the toil that was involved with doing that work that you're just like, oh, okay, now I have an award for that thing I did a while ago.
Yeah, it's true. You sort of very much live in the moment. What have you done lately, or what's the last thing you did? And it's definitely like a freelance thing. Is like it gets a little better with time, but and I'm lucky to have been working on the same show for over 5 years. But usually it's like you get off a gig, and it's like, and you get this kind of like relief for a few days, and then you start getting this twitch of like, when's the next thing coming? What's the next gig? Even though they always come, but there's this fear that is like, oh, maybe I'll never work again. It doesn't really go away.
Yeah, absolutely. You've done work for like everybody from like Coca-Cola to Uber to Viacom. You did a thing with Amy Vorpahl. What's it like to find gigs as a freelancer within your trade?
Well, it's hard at first. It's really hard. That kind of even if you're starting from scratch, or even just like moving to a new city, or trying to move from like movies to commercials, or even trying to move from like low budget movies to like mid budget to union to like high. I mean, all these like kind of transitions are really tricky, because in the industry, there's very little room for failure, or kind of not doing a good job, right? It's just sort of like the stakes are really high, because there's so much money involved usually, and like in this idea that all this concerted effort has to come together in this one singular moment. So you can't be late, and the thing that you are supposed to be making needs to be ready to go, and whatever. So people tend to be really cautious about who they hire. And the other thing is, like, because you are going to be working so intimately with folks for like 12 plus hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week, like, you don't want to work with somebody that you're not going to get along with, or who's a jerk or whatever. So that stuff is really important. And what tends to happen is people tend to hire people based on word of mouth only. So it's like, I go to the people that I have worked with in the past first, that I like and that I know are good, and see if they're available. And if they're not, then I ask for referrals from them for other people that they may have worked up with in the interim, and there's this whole thing about who you refer is kind of like, you don't want to refer someone that's bad, because then that kind of comes back to you in a way. So there's like this whole, it's a serious boundary, to get through. And yeah, so at this point for me, it's mostly just word of mouth. If somebody might approach me about a job, and then we kind of talk through it, and maybe I kind of pitch some ideas, or give a cost estimate or something like that. But when you're starting out, it can be pretty tricky.
Yeah, just starting out, you mentioned doing work for free essentially in order to build a portfolio. And that is definitely something that happens through a lot of different fields. I know the first few shows that I put together online, I essentially was the investor for them because obviously no one else is going to pay for them. And moving forward with like that in mind, like what do you think were the lessons that you learned working for free that were invaluable when you started doing paid gigs?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a bummer that it's that way. It's just it's not. I don't think it's cool to work for free. And I mean, I can appreciate when it's like a passion project and you're like a peer or a collaborator. But like working just for experience, I think is not really that great. Maybe if it's like a formal kind of internship, and there's like a school that is establishing boundaries and things like that, it's something that I try to like do differently. And I try to hire people that maybe don't have a lot of experience, or give people a shot, or a chance, or whatever, when it's possible. But things I learned from that are, through that whole journey, are, you can start out, whatever it is that you want to do, like say you want to be a production designer, right? Which is kind of like the apex of the art department. And you could start out by just being a production designer. You don't necessarily have to be a production assistant, or a carpenter, or whatever. Those things will help you, and those are skills you can pick up, and it sort of definitely helps to have, the more experience you have, the better. But you could production design a short film, maybe for free or a really low fee or whatever, and start building that kind of credits and experience and stuff. It's probably good to kind of do both a little bit, to sort of like get out there and be a production designer on things, but also to do these, maybe gigs that pay a little more, that are like a set dresser or a scenic painter or whatever, to get that experience, and also to kind of keep you above water. But there's a tricky thing that happens if you sort of try to really climb your way up, is that it's like kind of like a golden handcuffs thing. It's like if you get really good at being a set carpenter, for instance, I joined the union as a set carpenter working on Prison Break in Dallas, and it was awesome. It was a great experience. But then it was sort of like, wow, I'm a really good carpenter, and yes, I was writing screenplays and doing other things, but no one really cares about that, right? They just know, like, oh, Rick, that guy could really build something. Let me hire him. And you can say, I got a screenplay or I got an idea, and they're like, I don't really care. I just want you to build this thing for me. So you sort of like these traps that you can get into, and they're hard to kind of get out of too. So that's like a kind of a pitfall of this industry.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like a lot of the time you can get even typecast, even if you're part of like the production crew or
Yeah.
something like that, because you've built up your reputation around doing this thing. So being diverse in your skill sets isn't necessarily the best way to break in a lot of the time, it seems.
Yeah, I think just kind of getting out there and trying to do what you want to be doing, like in a full-throated kind of way, is important. Maybe it's not the only angle that you should be working, but it definitely seems like one that I kind of wish I had tried sooner.
Yeah, doing building different skill sets.
Well, I just mean like kind of like, if you want to be a director, you should direct things, even if they're just things you shoot on your phone. You know what I mean? And then also learn other skill sets, but don't like be like, well, I'm gonna wait to direct things until I get like 10 years of experience, or until someone invites me to be a director. You know what I mean? I think you should just get out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Pursuing passion projects is definitely a great way to build your portfolio and like figure out, do I actually like this enough to pursue
Sure.
this as a full-time gig? Do I enjoy this enough to like deal with all the other heartaches that come with the industry in general, and like the
Yeah.
production schedule, and like how difficult it can be to keep up with the pace of things? Because if you're not as into it, then maybe you just find a different job and you stay doing it as a hobby, right? Super cool. Okay. How did you end up working on Dropout?
A friend of mine, actually, I worked in the industry for a few years, like 10 years or so, and then I went back to school at UCLA for writing and directing. I did a MFA there, and one of my classmates from that was producing something for College Humor, and producing sketches, and so she hired me to do a couple of sketches for them in the summer before Dimension 20 was a thing, and then it was at a time when College Humor was spinning up a lot of new content. They were investing a lot of money into these big new shows. It was before Dropout had launched, and that was kind of like they were building all this new content in order to launch Dropout. And one of the shows that they were going to do was this actual play show, D&D actual play show. Lucretia, my friend who had produced those sketches, she got brought on to produce this actual play show for College Humor, and she knew that I like played D&D, and we love working together and stuff. So she brought me in to talk to them about that. It seemed like it was going to be a good fit, and so I came on board. And at that time, it was like super early in the development process of the show. It was actually called Fantasy High at that point. It wasn't called Dimension 20 because it was just a one-off kind of thing. And the first idea for a set was like a high school classroom, like a fantasy high school classroom, and it sort of evolved. Like we weren't even going to use miniatures necessarily at first. It was like I got to be part of this development process by suggesting things, and they would suggest things, and I would bring back visuals and ideas, and which was awesome. It was like one of the most gratifying production design experiences I've ever had, yeah. And then we shot that season, and then we just keep shooting more seasons.
I was smiling because it's like that's like one of the, everyone has like one story about how like college was actually a good networking opportunity, but that's like what everybody recommends is like, hey, go to college to network. But for you, in your case, it ended up turning into a 5-year gig, you said. So you've been working for 5 years for College Humor / Dropout, right?
Yeah, over almost 5.5 now.
Yeah. Would you say that a majority of your time then is for Dropout currently?
Yes. Yeah. I'm freelance still, so it's kind of like season to season, and then there's other projects like we've been doing these auctions, and just other little things that are D20 related that pop up. So when those projects are going on, I work for them, and then I'll have downtime when I'm not working for them. But yeah, I stay pretty busy working for D20.
How do you, and we're gonna like segue briefly into this if you're okay with it. How
Sure.
you mentioned before we started recording, so you have a family.
hmm
I have a family as a freelancer. How are you balancing that, and like what is important to you as far as like things that you make certain to do for your family to make sure that you are still being like a good family member to them, parent?
Yeah, well, I'm taking a big deep breath because I think it's a real constant struggle. My wife is also in the industry. She's an editor, so we both have these crazy jobs in the sense that they're kind of irrational, that they don't really care about our schedules or our lives. They don't care that, your child is sick or potty training, really. It's just the nature of production. And they also often require, 12-hour days or sometimes more if there's like a really intense deadline that we're trying to get to. And it's really tricky balancing that with both of us. We have two kids. We have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so it's a constant thing we're thinking about is how to be good parents and have a good family life, and and be connected in our relationship and stuff. It takes a lot of effort. On the other side, we both have a lot of understanding and appreciation for what the kind of freelance film industry life is like, and a lot of grace for each other, and we try to support each other. But yeah, I don't know. I have been doing a thing in the last like year or two where I just don't always work 12-hour days. I try to work less some days if there's not a need to, if I can get away with less. My wife and I live on an island up here in Washington, and kind of remote, like homesteady place. And so I have a shop here, and I build a lot of stuff from home. And we've actually, since COVID, been building a lot of stuff up here, and I have model makers come up here and stay up here sometimes, sort of create like a little like art commune, so that because I would rather be here than in Los Angeles. But I do have to go down there when it's time to shoot to kind of finish the sets and do the load in and do the shoot and stuff. So yeah, so I guess it's kind of like that's a thing I'm working on every front I possibly can, trying to set boundaries, and part of it is like calendar work, being like, okay, these dates we're just gonna take this family trip, or we're gonna do this, like putting boundaries and stuff up, and supporting each other in our work, and just kind of pushing back against the kind of machine that is the film industry to try to have space for us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was asked this question last year when I was on a panel for freelancing at Gen Con, and I was like, wow, I haven't actually thought about this. So I actually need to think about this. And it was just like me and B Dave who had kids as freelancers, and we were both like, yeah, for me, it was mostly just that when I do spend time with my kids, I make it very intentional. Like I actually put my kids into my schedule book, because otherwise I just like get overwhelmed with like this never-ending list of to do. Because I set my own schedule, so it's like impossible for me to actually and because I work at home, it can be difficult. Like the flip side of that, it's great to like have access to your family at all times, but at the same time, when you're working, you can end up shutting yourself off for long periods of time because like you're so focused on getting everything that you need to get done, and then you can be ignoring your family. At least in my case, I know that I have fallen into that trap because you have to be really intentional, especially working at home and like COVID.
The work never ends. There's always more things to do, so you have to just be like, okay, it's 5 o'clock or it's 7 o'clock or whatever. I am done for the day, and turn off the lights.
Yeah, for me, because of the way that my brain works, I was in the military for so long, I never looked into it, but like talking to other people about like how their brains work and stuff, I'm just like, yeah, why does my brain work this way? And then like I'm, talking to people with like ADHD and like autism, and like I have been taking like surveys and stuff, and like finding that I'm like definitely not neurotypical. So for my routine, like I actually started taking like CBD and THC to
Oh,
be able to relax. And
mhm.
it was like mind blowing. Like the first time like I took it while I was at home, and I just like took a little bit. I would like went into my kids' room and I like did bedtime routine with them, which sometimes I can miss because I work late as I run games.
Yep.
And I found myself like just awkwardly like weeping as I'm like having this conversation with my son because I was just so present and in the moment and not worried about like the next thing. That I was just really enjoying that time with my son because of what CBD and THC was like able to do for me. So
Sure.
medicating sometimes can be the answer, but I'm not telling everybody to get high. But
It doesn't hurt. Well, maybe sometimes it does, but uh no, but I think that point of that is just being is like it's a thing you have to put in work into. You have to really I remember being in grad school before I got married and had kids and seeing, we at UCLA we would occasionally get to, talk to some famous directors and creative people. And I remember kind of looking at them, I was more kind of focused on being a writer director at that point, but looking at them as models and being like, oh, here's this director I get to, intern with or whatever, and kind of over and over again realizing like, oh, this person's not really a good person, or this person actually is not really raising their kid, or they're not really like, they're like seeing these things like, oh, this person has achieved great success, but they actually haven't found the balance that and the things that like are really actually pretty important to me in my life. And this is not a role model for me, which is devastating, especially when you talk to or you're around directors that you think that you love their work and you're like, this person is awesome, and then you're like, oh, I don't really want to be this person, and anyway, the point is just that it's a thing that you have to kind of work on, I think, to manifest, and to continually work at, stuff that's not your job, because the job is so intense and will just eat your whole life.
yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I've been going through this transition lately as far as well, both my gender and then like me going from like just doing this full-time freelancing gigs that I do and like working in tabletop. And I found that there's this like switch after a certain point, like that where people stop treating you like a person as much as they do a commodity.
Mm.
And there's that realization that I've had in the past 6 months that like if I don't value the time that I have with my children and like my partner and like make this time for the people who I actually believe to be my friends and like make this special time actually meaningful, then I'm not going to have anything when I just bury myself in my work and I sort of can get lost in that way. And I think that leads to kind of a dark road, ultimately, because, like you said, the work never ends. You could
Yeah.
just work yourself to death and no one would care at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there would still be more work to do, even after you keeled over or whatever.
Speaking of work, what's like a normal production cycle for you, like when you build a show and specifically talking about like Dimension 20?
Sure. Generally I'll get a email or Slack or something from the kind of executive team at College Humor. David Kearns and Kyle Rohrbach is the head of production over there. So they'll be like, "Hey, we got a new season coming up. These are the dates we think it's shooting. We think it's going to be a 8 episode season, and this person is GMing, Jasmine is GMing or whatever, and we're going to use minis, and we're going to have 3 battles, and then it's like, great. So then we start having meetings as soon as possible with the GM to kind of like just get the juice, hear the take on it, and we kind of like just talk about it and sort of like kind of all pick up the vibe in a way. It's sort of like a brainstorming type of session, and then we start to build a budget and a calendar, because if we know kind of when we're shooting, then we can work backwards to figure out when we need to have things ready by, and then knowing that information, the timing, as well as like what it is that we're building. If it's like a DM screen and 3 battle maps and some props or whatever, we can start to estimate cost and start to figure out what kind of labor we're going to need, and then we can sort of put our, and I say we, usually at that point it's just me and an art director helping me, and then we'll start to put together a labor plan, like, okay, we're going to need this many model makers, and we're going to need a miniatures painter for this time, and this, and we start to assemble that sketch of a plan, and and then we have a lot of meetings with the GM and go through battle concepts. Because for us, we put a lot of into them, and they're all kind of like a little, like almost like a little movie set piece. And often they're very elaborate and have like dynamic things. And the other part about our battles is that after we run the game, the director and the production team, they go back and shoot close-ups of so they recreate the battle in like a black box, and they sort of so that has to be planned for, like, oh, the walls have to be removable so you can get the camera in there, or there's a lot of details to it that are part of it. And then often we'll do character creation as early as possible once the cast is locked in, because it's definitely I think it's probably in any game, but it's a hallmark of D20 is we try to have a full and cohesive arc that lands like in the 6 episodes, that pays off all of the individual player characters arcs, and so a lot of times we'll have like a concept and a setting and a genre, but then once we get into character creation, it's like, oh, maybe this is actually more of like a whodunit than a heist or whatever, so that can actually adjust what it is that the season is. So then we go back to kind of hashing out all these battles, and then we get into building it. We source and build all this stuff. We work with a lot of different vendors and spin up our workshop here, and we have people in the shop working. At some point, then we create it all up and ship it down to LA, and I'll go down there, and usually we have like a week of finishing touches and then setting up the set proper in the studio, and loading everything in and kind of getting ready for that shoot. We've been using projections a lot recently, so that's kind of a new thing that's also an ingredient, is like designing projections and testing them and stuff. And then we'll shoot, and we usually shoot a 12-hour day, so it'll be 2 episodes a day. So we'll start at like 8 or 9 in the morning, and by like 11, the cast has gone through makeup and sound and is sitting at the table, and we'll shoot for like an hour and change, and we'll take a bio break. We'll shoot for another hour, and that'll be the end of that episode. We'll take a bio break, and then we'll do the adventuring party, which is like a talk back, like a 20-minute talk back show. And then we go to lunch, and then the cast changes outfits and goes through makeup again and stuff, and gets mic'd back up, and then we do the whole thing again for the second part of the day. Shoot a full episode and shoot an adventuring party. And usually, if it's a shorter season, like maybe like a 6-episode season or something like that, we'll try to do it consecutive days. So we'll do like 3 days in a row, or 4 days in a row, or 5 days in a row. But beyond that, the longer series, it's tricky, because it's just so much writing and prep work for a GM to be able to, there's some point they just are exhausted and have run out of pieces of railroad to put in front of the train, and they just need time. So we'll spread out longer seasons more than that. And then we shoot close-ups of the miniatures, if there's miniatures, after it's all done, for a few days, and then they'll go into post-production, which I'm not really involved in, and that's where we create illustrations and graphics and all the sound effects and music and all that sort of stuff, and then it gets released.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's something that's very interesting that I didn't know about, for instance, like screenplays and like things like that before you find out eventually that a lot of these things are sort of templated. They have a sort of set boilerplate way that they function, so that people are speaking a certain language. So when you are designing a production set, you are shifting to make sure that you create that template and the pacing is correct for a season. So I think that's very interesting. Have you ever built something and then had someone completely like go left instead of right, and then it just never got seen, and then
Yeah, well, so we put a lot of effort and money into the sets and stuff, right? Into these visual parts of it. So we really don't want to waste any production money. We want all the production, whatever money we have, we want it to all be on screen, So it's a thing we really try to avoid. That being said, the show is improvised still, we've definitely done things where we say like, okay, we're going to have 3 battles over this six episode season, but maybe one of the battles we don't use it, or I think, for instance, in Coffin Run, spoilers for Coffin Run, there's a chase sequence that we didn't use all three of the maps the little mini maps that we had set up, because we just didn't have time and kind of didn't really need it. So it didn't. I think they used it in maybe some insert shots, but it didn't come out for the players to use. And sometimes it's like, oh, let's switch the order of these maps because actually we should go to this thing first. But all that being said, generally the GMs that we work with are so skilled and so wildly talented that they can sort of land the plane on the tiny little airstrip, pretty well. It's really surprising. Like I could think of one time in Escape from the Bloodkeep where we have this battle map that's ready and it's towards the end of this role play episode, and I know, like, because like I'm looking at my watch, it's like, well, they got about 10 minutes of time left in this episode, and then he has to bring out the battle map, but the players decide to get in a portal and go to, like, 3,000 miles away and have this long involved sub adventure because they hooked onto something that was, maybe not something which way Brennan wanted them to go, but he validated it and took them there. And I'm thinking, like, I know that that in 10 minutes they're going to be on an airship battle. I have no idea how that is going to happen, and somehow, he always somehow just weaves it, and it just so seamlessly, and suddenly they're on an airship battle. It's like that is the true wizardry of really, really talented GMs, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That is the sort of not everyone has to adhere to this, but that is definitely you take a left turn, you take a right turn, you still end up with the dragon in the dungeon room. So as you are, or as someone is GMing for something like Dimension 20, I would imagine that it's really stressful in that respect because, of course, the GM meets you if they're like a guest GM or someone, and then like they build some rapport with you, and then they see like all the hard work you put into it, and then and then the players like turn away from that set piece, and you're just like, oh shit, what do I do?
Yeah, well, you and I know that, like, the left door and the right door both go to the dragon, but the players can't feel that. They should
Yeah.
never feel that or know that. I mean, maybe they know it on a like deeper level, and that probably is true on our show, that like players kind of know the conceit of it is like, oh yeah, we have these set pieces, and like it's not on rails, but we are going to kind of like shoehorn you into this beat. But hopefully that beat actually services everything that's happening and all the improv that you've done up to that point. And to that point, we do try to design the battles in a kind of way that we provide a lot of room for improvisation. And, it does happen fully where, like, we have designed like these bad guys or whatever it are, these goblins, as like a bad faction or whatever it is. They're the bad guys in this case. And then somehow through the role play, they're not the bad guys anymore. And they're now the good guys. And Brennan and I are back there being like, okay, what other minis can we use? Like trying to pivot, so we create things in a modular way to still try to give the GM and the players as many tools and things to kind of create the story they want to create. So it's a really fun, actually, on the backside of that, it's really fun creatively to try to like predict that and to try to like map out like, okay, they're going to want to do this, and like, oh, let's put some chains there and let's do this and this because that's what I would want to do or whatever.
Yeah, I imagine that something like Fantasy High would be a little bit easier to work with because you know that you are going to stay within like a certain realm and you have the railings in place to a certain degree, unlike a completely new series, right? What's the difference as far as like your prep work for something like Fantasy High as compared to like a whole new series, like for instance, Bloodkeep or Coffin Run?
It really varies season to season, and that's kind of one of the fun things about the job is we go into such different settings. Like a fantasy high school, or like a Lord of the Rings thing, or like a black and white horror film. So each one of those, a big part of being a production designer and working in the art department in film and TV is, you're never working on the same thing twice. And so whenever a new setting, a new, film or project comes in, if it's about like, trains from the 1850s, then you have to become an expert about trains from the 1850s, and you also may need to hire some people who are experts to advise you. So you part of the practice of this job is becoming like a a cottage expert in like all these different little worlds, which is also part of what I love about it. I love world building and getting to read 1,000 Wikipedia articles and buy some cool books or whatever to educate myself about a setting. Yeah, it just varies. We did a season called Starstruck that is based off of some graphic novels that Brennan Mulligan's mom wrote. These incredible like cult classic comics from like the 80s, right? And I have the book over here, and so for that one, it was like reading comics, taking pictures of the pages, trying to understand how the technology worked and what was the currency and the, just like, so it was like a deep dive into this comic versus other things are more kind of ephemeral and you're kind of pulling things. That was very like, this is the lore. Now just extract it.
Right. Your Google search history must be fucking wild.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, what's your favorite, if you're looking at like, what's your favorite resource to tap into, like, as a production designer? What's your favorite resource to tap into, like the History Channel or like PBS or like, what do you end up going back to a lot?
I mean, really, for me personally, it's a lot of reading online, like reading articles, reading, Reddit or just like people who are more knowledgeable than me discussing something, and because other people have already asked the questions that I'm asking, it's just a matter of finding the correct and concise answer. So that, and then I do tons of like Google image searches and create folders and folders of reference. I have people help me do that sometimes early on. We kind of create like, and then we go back through and like, no, let's not use that one. Oh yeah, this one. I really love this part of this. And then yeah, I'll watch films too. Yeah, less like History Channel stuff and more kind of like history book kind of stuff or history article kind of stuff.
Super cool. Yeah. What was since we did talk about Coffin Run briefly, I do have to ask the question, what was your favorite part of working on Coffin Run? And I know some like ephemeral details or like some minor details from talking to Jasmine about this, but I wanted to get your take on it and like,
Sure.
was that production different than others and like how was it and everything like that?
Yeah, well, I would love to hear Jasmine's take on it. Looking back, because like we worked together a lot, and then when it was over, it was over. We kind of parted ways, whatever. But honestly, I think my favorite thing about that season, well, I guess there was two things. One was just getting to work with Jasmine because that was her first time on D20, and she just has her own unique style. I loved how like mini centric she was. Right away she was like, oh yeah, we're doing minis. Well, and I was like, yes. So it was really fun to work with someone who was so kind of minis psyched, and also the ideas and things that she had were just like very out of the box. I mean, Orion was a big part of that too, that collaboration there. But like we did a mechanic on the final battle where there was like these vials of blood. They were, this is spoilers, but they were reviving Dracula, and so there was this cup full of like, I think it was pomegranate juice is what we used, but the filling of the cup represented Dracula being like fully revived and his thirst satiated. And so each time she had these little vials that she would add in, but then if Dracula took damage, she would take a sip out of the cup to lower the level back down. It was like really novel thing, that you don't really see at a D&D table. So that was I love, things like that we can add something to a regular D&D experience. And then I just also really like I like the black and white aesthetic. It was so stylized. It's really fun to do minis that are to make a really strong aesthetic choice. Part of the reason we chose that actually was because it was kind of a creative solution because we really did not have a lot of time from the time that spun up. I was just finishing another season, and they wanted to do minis, which kind of takes some time to do, and so as a solution, like, what if we do black and white? Because it's a lot faster to paint black and white minis, but it also gives this really strong vibe, and it was like just a perfect creative solution. So,
Yeah, I remember briefly hearing, and I believe that they have talked about this publicly, or like they've mentioned at least, that you had a shorter production cycle because you were kind of in between seasons, and that was the pitch that D20 liked from her most to fit within your current schedule because D20 you all shoot like I believe 6 to 9 months prior, right? Something like that, at least.
yeah, it depends on it's definitely like somewhere between like 4 and 9 months or something. It kind of depends on, they have a pretty regular airing schedule, so it's like they just have to keep that going. But there's a kind of a minimum amount of time that it takes to run post. I think it's like 4 to 6 months or something.
I remember talking to Jasmine about like the kit bashing that you were doing. Did you end up doing a lot of different unique kit bashes for Coffin Run to make that work in a short time that saved you time?
Well, because it was kind of like, I mean, in a way, oftentimes the shows that the seasons that we do for Dimension 20 are so much a merging of two disparate worlds, like American high school and fantasy tropes. Like there's just not a lot of like skater dwarf minis that exist. So that's like kit bashing, right? Or sculpting, or some other like more of an original genesis versus like just getting something off the shelf that's pre-made. For Coffin Run, because it's sort of gas lamp era, Victorian, like there was actually a lot of miniatures that worked. So we did do a fair amount of kit bashing in the sense of like we kind of added little tweaks, little sculpted green stuff details to different things to make it work. Luckily, we were able to use a lot of existing miniatures, which is also helpful with that time frame.
Yeah, super cool. So I wanted to turn to some of our community questions. And if you are listening and you want to ask such questions in the future, I do post who's coming up on the show, and you can ask these questions and drop them in there. So I've got time for 2 questions for you, Rick. And Flower Crown Gaming is asking, what part of mini painting do you find that to be the most challenging, and what is the most rewarding for you?
Well, thank you for the question. Flower Crown Gaming, was it?
Yeah.
I mean, the eyes are really hard. They just always are. It doesn't matter how skilled you are. It's like, it's just so tiny of a detail. That's true. But most gratifying, I think for me, the most gratifying moment of whether it's minis or a set, a battle set, is bringing it out to the table and having the cast come in and look at it and just be, ooh and ah, and or when there's a moment during a battle where something dynamic happens, where like a set changes or a new mini comes out that they weren't expecting, that kind of is like, oh, I just love it. That's the best for me.
Yeah, that feels like that would be just like, oh, they love it. You know, that feels great.
It's very gratifying. It's very validating. It's good for a creative person. You love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have another question. Frey asks, what's the recipe for your wolf stew and how did you make it look so good?
Howdy, Frey. Thanks for the question. Well, you start with wolf stock, and no, we actually it was mostly Raven Bartlett was the one who executed that. It was a really challenging build. We have not ever built anything quite like that. It involved kind of essentially like figuring out what we wanted and then kind of breaking it down, right? So like the cauldron part of it was sculpted foam. That was fairly easy part to figure out. Head and paws were 3D printed. So we identified an existing STL, that someone had 3D sculpted, and reached out to them, and then we cut the STL, where we wanted it, and figured out what scale we wanted it to be, had it printed up, and then Shane Brockway, our minis painter, painted that. And then for the stew itself, we did have actually a sample up there on my wall. We did a few samples of it, but we realized that we needed to actually sculpt all of these the elements individually. So like potatoes and carrots and peas, and then paint them, and then put them in, arrange them in where we wanted them, and then do a resin pour with tint in it, to give it some kind of consistency that's sort of stew like. yeah, so that was kind of the process. It's scary because you're like, okay, this is coming along, it's coming along, but like, and then the last step is to pour this like resin all over it, which either is going to work or you got to start over, stakes are high, but turned out really well. I think if you go to Raven Bartlett's Instagram, you can see on there a bunch of pictures that they took of the process. So if you're curious about that, you can see more there.
That feels like I feel like after listening to that, I'm just thinking about what does that Excel sheet look like? Like for like every piece that you have, and you have all these different elements. And do you sort of use that as like a production designer now to sort of keep things on track and meet your timelines? What do you use to sort of organize all that sort of production design?
Well, as a production designer, you use an art director as much as you can, but because it's a full-time job, like keeping track of all this stuff and like making sure that the paint is there in time and we have to get express shipping on that and this, it's this huge effort. And then, there's also a budget that we have to stay on and make decisions about what we can afford, and ways to get stuff done. Yeah, so we have like a Google Drive usually that I and the art director or art director share, and it has our we use Google Sheets mainly, and has like our budget tracker and a battle maps thing. We used to design kind of workshop the battle maps back in the day before COVID and before I moved. Brendan and I would sit in a room with like a big 4x8 marker board, and we kind of grid it out and be like, okay, battle one, battle two, battle three, and we would sort of write things in, and sometimes be like, oh, let's take those bad guys and move them over there, and what if we move these two, as like very much like a visual thing. But now I've like replicated that on a Google Sheet, and we'll share the sheet and do like Zoom calls and fill it out that way, so yeah, whatever works, whatever. But there's definitely a lot of list making and a lot of kind of administrative computer work to make it all happen.
Yeah, definitely. I see a lot of parallels between what I do now for like project management for designing a book, for a tabletop book, and also like when I used to be in the military, like one of the last jobs that I had was being an operations chief, and like making sure that all the platoons going out when they were going out to missions had what they needed, and then making sure I talk with the platoon commander and the platoon sergeant and making sure that they know what they need logistically to handle this one mission, and then I provide creative solutions when I can't find exactly what they need. So
yeah, that I've never been in the military, but as I understand it, the film hierarchy and kind of much of the things, the way that a set works and stuff are based on military stuff. So it's not surprising to hear that.
okay, well that's no, I have so many more questions. I'm gonna need to dwell on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, Rick. Before I let everyone loose, did you want to talk about anything that you have coming up, or anything that you wanted to shed a little more light onto?
No, thank you so much for having me. Really, it was a pleasure. I enjoy talking about this stuff, and I appreciate the opportunity. No, people can follow me on Twitter at Richard H. Perry, if they want, and stay tuned to Dropout. There's like 3 or 4 seasons that are already done, ready to go, that are gonna blow people away.
That's really exciting. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming on. Thanks so much for listening to the Dollars and Dragons podcast. If you'd like to support me, and more importantly, my editor who does all of the heavy lifting here, then you can subscribe to patreon.com/isfriday. And that is going to go straight to my editor. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.